Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode and another season of She Talks Business. And this season is going to be a little bit interesting. So, let me give you the backstory. A couple weeks ago, my niece flew in from Canada and spent almost 3 weeks with us. One of those weeks, we were away on business. And while she was visiting us, we had a lot of conversations about business because she has started her own business. And of course, she's wanting to learn and grow and know things about business that I have a little bit more experience in, seeing I've been doing this for such a long time. And one of the things that I noticed in conversations with her is that she has this really unique ability to ask really smart, insightful questions. And so I asked her, how would you feel about being on my podcast for a season and interviewing me and asking me the things that anyone who is starting a business might like to know? Now, before you think, oh, well, I'm not starting a business, this might not be for me, I want to encourage you that sometimes the biggest mistake we make as seasoned business owners is we forget what it was like to start. We forget what it's like to have beginner mind. So just because a question is being asked from someone who is in startup mode, wanting to grow a business, doesn't mean that it isn't valuable for someone who's already built a successful business. So I hope you enjoy this season. There's probably going to be 4 to 6 episodes where we're going to have conversations like this. And before we get started, let me just tell you a little bit about my niece. So my niece is Mackenzie St. Laurent. She is a wellness counselor who specializes in the menstrual cycle, and she is on a mission to serve those who struggle with period problems through holistic practices. As you can well imagine, her own life experiences have shaped her desire to help others, like many of us business owners. She uses her education, university education in psychology, and her diploma in wellness counseling to help people feel heard, hence the really great question asking, and offer alternative solutions so that they can not only feel their best, but have a better period naturally. And I will put the link to her website in the show notes. So if you want to learn more about her, you can. She has a newsletter, blog on Substack called The Cycle Mag, and she writes really insightful and helpful things related to wellness. And I got to tell you, I learned a lot of stuff from her while she was here visiting. Mackenzie, hello, welcome.
Hello, it's so good to be here.
It's good to have you here. How are you feeling about this responsibility for interviewing your auntie over the next little while?
I feel both excited and nervous, of course. I feel a responsibility, but just really excited to have these conversations with you.
It's great. I'm excited too. And I love that you feel excited and nervous because excitement and nervousness feel the same. It just really depends on what you choose to call it. So I'm going to hand things over to you and let's get started.
Awesome, great. So I've been reflecting a lot on the conversations we've had in preparation for this season and these episodes. And I really wanted to start with mindset because that's where I found was the biggest block for me in getting started. All the rest came a little bit easier once we addressed some of the fears and reservations that I had. So, my first question is, what would you tell someone who is just starting out and fear is at the wheel? They're really leaning into that fear, and that fear is maybe preventing them from taking any first steps. What would you tell them?
I would tell them that fear is 100% natural and that every single person who starts feels some sense of fear. We all have this inner dialogue. And unfortunately, for many people, the inner dialogue is usually a critic. It's not an inner champion. And that inner critic is really, really good at making things up to make us believe that we can't do the things that we aspire to do. And fear is normal. And I would encourage you to look at things that you have done in the past where fear has been at the wheel and you have been successful because
Mm.
we all are capable of doing hard things. And we have all done things that scare us. I mean, the first time you got on a bicycle without training wheels, it was scary, but you did it and you learned how to ride a bike. The first time anybody put skis on to go down a ski hill, it was scary, but they did it. And hopefully without falling and hurting themselves. The first time you sell something to somebody, it's scary. All of these things are scary, but confidence comes and certainty comes from courage. And courage means acting in spite of your fears, not letting fear be the driver, but putting fear in the back seat.
That's really insightful. And a couple of things really stood out. One was the saying, feel the fear and do it anyways. It sounds like that's kind of part of it, is not letting that fear make the final decision. Like you said, putting it in the back seat, which is interesting because it's not outside of the car. It's bringing it along for the ride. It's going to be, like you said, it's normal. It's part of the experience. And the other thing is just normalizing that it's not a personal failing that you have fear. Everybody feels that way in the beginning. And I'm sure, and I know that you felt that way when you first started. And when we were talking and we talked about starting and not finishing something, I'm curious how often you see people starting something and letting fear stop them from continuing. Like, yeah, can you speak a bit about that?
I see it a lot. And I'm not sure. It's, the fear that typically gets in the way of finishing is the fear of not being good enough,
Mm,
not doing the thing good enough, which is rooted in not being good enough. And I think that if we could just be more comfortable taking imperfect action instead of waiting for things to be perfect, then we would accomplish a lot more in life. But so many people, and I'm sure people here listening can relate to this, they want things to be perfect. And there is no such thing as perfect, because once you do something, if you do it again, you can do it better. And so
mm,
where's the goalpost? When is it ever ready? If you look at successful companies like Apple, for example, the very first iPhone wasn't perfect. Why do they do software updates on phones on a regular basis? Because they're not perfect. They're never
mm,
perfect. And so we have this false belief that we have to make something perfect before we put it out in the world. I read a quote, or I read something, it wasn't really a quote, it was something someone wrote on Facebook. I think it might have been Jim Palmer. And he said that when he first started out, he remembered his coach telling him that his imperfect book was out on the store shelves getting him business, while Jim's perfect manuscript was still locked away in his computer. And I
mm.
read that and I thought, oh wow, that really hits home, because I've got an imperfect or a perfect one, an imperfect wanting to be perfect book manuscript that I've started and haven't finished too. But that to me was just such a metaphor for just get it out there and perfect it as you go. There can be a second edition, a third edition, a fourth edition. There can be a do-over. But you gotta start, you gotta ship. And I think it's a Stephen Pressfield book called Do the Work. And he talks a lot about that. Just do the work, just get the work out there and get better as you go along. But how can you get better if you don't put things out there for other people to see and interact with and get feedback from the people that you're actually creating for? You can't. So you're
Mm.
really stuck in this echo chamber of yourself saying it's not good enough yet, it's not good enough yet, it's not good enough yet. And that is, an analysis paralysis loop that prevents people from really tapping into their potential and their greatness.
Yeah, there's so much richness there and so many questions, follow-up questions that I have. But I really want to know the steps, like what's one concrete step to overcome. We talked about perfectionism, and I
Mhm.
remember I was saying, I didn't think I was a perfectionist because I thought perfectionists were the person that went above and beyond and their work is always incredible, but I don't finish things. And you had the insight to be like, that is perfectionism because it gets in the way. So, what's one action that you would recommend someone taking to combat that perfectionism? And in tandem with that, disentangling the self worth from your work. Like, you are not your work. And I think what I'm hearing and in my experience is, and you said that root of not good enough, of how can we start to separate the work that we put out in the world from who we are as a person?
Hmm. That's a great question. So let me start with, what can you do to get the work out there? Sometimes you need a coach. Sometimes you need a peer group. You need somebody to hold you accountable. You need a little bit of inner self discipline to do it. I can tell you that I have a client who I told I've been telling forever that they need to do video. 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 They still aren't doing video. And so on one of their coaching calls, I said, if you don't publish a video between now and your next call, you don't get your call and you don't get your money back either. So I put a consequence on the table for them. Sure
Mm.
enough, they came to the call and they hadn't done their video. And I said, well, you have two options. One, we can cancel the call right now, or two, you can grab your phone and do a video and post it right now. And guess what they did?
I'm not sure, actually.
They grabbed their phone and
Nice.
they shot a video, and they had to do a couple of takes.
Mm-hmm.
They shot that video and they posted it. And they got tons of positive feedback. I think they even got a piece of business from the video. So sometimes you need somebody to do it with you. I have
Mm.
a client who is a psychologist. She specializes in ADHD. And one of the things that she talks about is having a body double, having somebody sit with you to help you get the work done. And so if you know that you're the type of person that needs that additional support, go find it. If you're not at the stage yet where you're ready to invest in working with a coach, go find a colleague that will do it with you. But don't find somebody who's going to let you off the hook. Find somebody
Mm.
who's going to force you to step up. That's one of the reasons that I think investing in coaching is so important for people, even when they don't have the money to do it yet. It's the money creates the tension that makes someone want to follow through, because they've got skin in the game. They've actually put money towards something. And so they don't want that money to be a sunk cost. And so money is often a driver that helps people to change their behavior. So that's how I would answer that question.
Mm.
The second question, how do you separate the work from your self-worth? If I knew that, I would be a gazillionaire. I don't know that you can 100% separate the work from your self-worth. I think what you have to do is to continue to invest in your self-worth. I think you need to continue to do the work of building your self-esteem and doing the hard work of feeling better about you. And when you start to feel better about you, then the work doesn't your confidence level in the work improves because you've done the inner work on you. I recommended this book to a lot of people, but Louise Hay's book, I think it's You Can Heal Your Life, is a really, really powerful book. And one of the things that I really like about that book is mirror work. And the mirror work makes you look yourself in the eye in a mirror and say, I love you exactly the way you are. Like it's basically really hard work to make you feel good about yourself. And I remember when I did that years and years and years ago, I would look in the mirror and I would look into my little eyes and I would cry. And I couldn't even say the words out loud. I would just look in the mirror, the tears run down my face. And over time, by sticking with the practice, because I knew
Mm.
there had to be something there. Because why else do I look myself in the mirror and really look into my eyes and cry? There's something going
Yeah.
on there, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I needed to keep practicing. And then over time, it got easy. And over time, it almost felt like I had more empathy for this
Mm.
woman that I was looking at in the mirror who was trying so hard to make a difference and be a good person. And it's doing the work on your own self-worth that makes it easier to do the work.
Wow, that answer was not the answer I was expecting, but it makes so much sense. And it reminds me there's another quote where it says the work is the work, and it's lowercase work and uppercase work, and how the work that you do in the world isn't actually separate from the work you do on yourself. And what I'm hearing is that it can actually, having a business can actually positively impact your self-worth because you have this thing that you care about so much. You've got skin in the game that all of a sudden it's like the risk of staying the same is worse than the risk of putting it out there. And through that, you find the things and the practices that help you to feel like you can do the work rather than believing the voice in your head that says that you can't. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really, really insightful. And there was so much richness in the first question. I wish I had asked them separately. And it reminded me of how we talked about growth mindset and the gap versus the gain. And I was curious if you could talk about the importance of that and what those little mindset shifts might look like when we're looking at someone who, like me, is used to looking at, oh, I have so far to go, which can be a great motivator. But sometimes when you're comparing yourself to your future self, that you're not quite there yet, it can actually have the opposite effect. So, yeah, a bit more about the gap and the gain.
So instead of comparing yourself to your future self, compare yourself to your past self. That's the
Mm,
biggest difference between the gap and the gain. Compare yourself to who you were when you started versus who you are aspiring to be. Look at the progress you've made. That's really looking at the gain. When you look at the gap, you look at where you are right now and you look at who you aspire to be, and all you see is what you haven't done. And so,
mm,
making it a habit of looking at the progress that you've made, especially when you're not feeling good enough or not feeling like you've done enough yet. It's important to look back at those things. I have a couple of things that I do that help me with my own gains. One
mm,
of them is I have a box in my office and it's full of thank you cards and letters that people have sent me over the years. And that is there to remind me of the impact that I've made in this world. When I pull a note or a letter and I look at what people have said to me, it reminds me of the impact that I've had over the years because there's lots of stuff in there for many years. And the other thing that I do, and this is kind of good because we're leading up to the new year, is once usually the week between Christmas and New Year's, I sit down and I go through my calendar for the past year and I look at every single thing that I did over the course of the last year. And I
mm,
stack it up. Like I did X number of coaching calls. Wow. I did X number of strategy sessions. Wow. I did. And I went here and I did this and I did that. And it's a good reminder of the gain. It's like how far I've come and what I did. How did I live my life this past year? And so I think sometimes the art of reflecting on the
mm.
progress we've made is a really important part of the journey. And if all you're ever doing is looking at where you want to go, then you're never quite enough. You're never quite ready. And the problem with only looking at the future is the closer you get to your new future, the further out it becomes. Because, let's look at you. You've just started this business and you and I talked about some financial goals. So once you reach one of those financial goals, you're already going to be thinking about another one. So you're never ever arrive on the horizon. The horizon
Mm.
is always moving. So if you're always comparing yourself to where you are against the horizon, you will always never be where you want to be. But if you look at where you've come from and you look at the progress that you've made, then that can actually fuel your self confidence to know that you're going to be able to get closer to the next horizon that you've set for yourself.
I'm hearing so many ties between my education in psychology and what you're talking about. And what's really standing out to me is typically like with anxiety, if you're thinking back, it's with through this negative lens. And I'm hearing putting on a different lens of just focusing on the past in terms of progress and going into it with that in mind can really help shift not only how you feel about yourself, as we talked about self-worth, but changing our neural pathways in what we're used to doing when we reflect on our experiences. Because oftentimes we can look back and be like, oh, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. And it's that self deprecation that maybe comes from always comparing yourself to who you wish that you could be. So that's really, really beneficial and helpful.
I think one of the things to remember is you will always catch yourself in the gap. Like it's human nature to do that. But what
Mm-hmm.
you want to do is you want to actually catch yourself and change your thinking. Because one of the things that we have the power to do is we have the power to control our thoughts and we have the power to cancel out thoughts that we've had and change them.
Mm-hmm.
We also have the ability to ruminate on things that we shouldn't spend time ruminating on. And so when you catch yourself comparing to where you want to be, recognize that you just did that and ask yourself, okay, how much progress have I made this year? And go look at the gains that you've made, and you will be able to get into the habit of shifting yourself out of the gap faster. But you're going to find yourself in the gap every day. It's human nature. It's the inner
Mm-hmm.
critic. It is what we do because we're trying to get to the next level. It's making sure that when you do that, that you recognize what you're doing and that you shift yourself into focusing on what you have already accomplished.
Sounds like really befriending your mind, like knowing what it does, having compassion for the fact that it does that. Like you said, we're very human, and then course correcting because we also, even though it's human nature to catch ourselves in the gap, and it's part of the ability of us to evolve, is that amazing dreaming,
Mm-hmm.
future projecting, but also knowing that we have more control over our mind and where it goes. And I want to know if you've always been that way. Have you always been good at doing those things of looking at your progress and your gains?
No, God, no. I'm a work in progress. And, I have not always been good at those things. I've been good at setting goals and reaching those goals. And then I've been really good at not setting another big set of goals because I've arrived at this place and then finding myself bored and stagnant and, you know, thinking I need a whole new set of goals. Because I think what can happen is when you set a big goal. So let's talk about growing your business. You set a goal, you want to get to $100,000. You get to $100,000, you're like, oh my God, I got $100,000. Like, what am I going to do next? And some people are right away, they're like, all right, we're going to get to 500. And other people are like, oh my God, I got to 100,000. I need to rest now. And
Mm.
then they plateau at 100,000 and they stay there for the next 5 years. And then all of a sudden, one day they get up and they go, oh, wow, I need new goals. I need some bigger goals again. So I think that it's important that you're constantly setting goals and you're moving that horizon out. But I mean, I've always been good at, I've been good at setting goals. I haven't always been good at setting bigger goals fast enough, but I have not always been good at looking at the gains that I've made. That has come over time. That's come from my own personal investment in my own learning. Like you said, and some of what I said sounds like what you learned in psychology. Well, The Gap and the Gain was written by Dr. Ben Hardy, who's a psychologist, and Dan Sullivan. And Mindset, where we talk about growth mindset and fixed mindset, was written by Carol Dweck. She's a psychologist. So I've read a lot of books about psychology. And one of the gifts that I have is I'm able to synthesize information and apply it in my life and business when I read. And so it's not a natural thing for me at all.
I love that response. And I really wanted to highlight that because I remember learning about growth mindset in school and being a bit discouraged of, because it talked about childhood and it talked about what we're encouraged by in our childhood really shapes whether we
Mhm.
have an innate or a more natural growth versus fixed mindset. And I felt really discouraged. But the beauty of it is, like you said, it's applying it. You're not stuck in that mindset just because that's where you typically go. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. And circling back to what you were saying about your client who like works with people with ADHD and body doubling and having that accountability, it reminds me of what we talked about of dream crushers versus more believing mirrors. And I really found that to be something that changed my perspective, especially going into actually being forward facing in my business. And what would be some advice that you have of, like, how do you protect your goals and how do you discern who might be the right people or the best people to talk to when you're in that very fragile beginning stages? I think of it like I feel like Bambi with new legs. I need to protect that. A stiff wind could blow me over. But yeah, just some advice on how to protect your dreams from those people and knowing where your boundaries lie with that.
So I think there's a couple of things there. I think, first of all, you need to become conscious of positive and negative energy. And when you spend time around people, they're either giving you energy or they're taking energy from you. And there's an expression out there that some people are energy vampires. I know, and I've spent time with an energy vampire because I feel it. I feel completely depleted and drained after being around them. What I've learned, and I've been doing this for decades now, is that when I spend time with people who constantly make me feel depleted and low energy, I start spending less time with them. I
Mm.
don't need to have a conversation with them and say, hey, you drained my energy. We're not going to hang out anymore. I just, all of a sudden, I'm busy. I don't have time. And I I just reserve less and less and less of my time for them because I know that it's not necessarily good for me. So I think the first thing is recognizing who are the people that give you energy in life and who are the people that take energy from you. And sometimes I'm not talking about somebody's had a bad day and they need your support. I'm talking about generalities. Like if you think about the 5 people you spend the most time with, you can ask yourself, do each of those people give you energy or take energy from you? And you'll be able to answer that question. We all can.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing is just developing the awareness. The second thing is paying attention to who you ask for advice and who you share your ideas with. I've talked about this before. My mom has never been an entrepreneur. My mom is the type of person that got a job and stayed for 10, 20 years. My mom is very, very, very risk averse. So I would never ask my mom for business advice because she doesn't have the capacity or the experience or the knowledge to ever give me good business advice because she doesn't know anything about running a business.
Mm.
And so I think sometimes what happens is entrepreneurs, especially when they've got these new ideas, what they're really looking for is validation and encouragement. And they are not mindful about where to get that from. And so they ask people that don't know anything about what it is that they aspire to do. And then they don't get what they want. And then they spiral because now somebody has cast some doubt on this big idea that they had. So I would say, don't ask people that have not done what you aspire to do for advice. I am never going to ask and guys, I don't mean this in any nasty way, but I'm never going to ask somebody who's obese, how I should lose weight. I'm never going to, or how I should exercise better. I'm going to ask somebody who's fit and healthy, who has demonstrated to me that they have the skills and ability to do that. I'm going to ask them to help me. What do I do? I'm not going to ask somebody who is broke and in debt how to build wealth because they don't have that skill. You're not going
Mm.
to go to your dentist and ask him how to treat a brain tumor. So we've got to be smart about who we look to for models in different parts of our life. And it's not to say that the person who's overweight and not healthy or the person who doesn't have money isn't a good person and isn't valuable and worthy in their own way. But what I'm saying is don't ask somebody for guidance on something you aspire to do if they don't have the expertise in that particular area of their own life, because you're not going to get what you need from them. So
Mm.
look for models who are not just a step ahead of you. I have a client who started working with me when their business was like a Bambi. Okay. It was like very, very fledgling business. And they were brave enough to invest in working with me. And over a 5-year period, they scaled their business tremendously, sold their business, exited with a nice payout, did amazing. And then there was someone else that they knew at the exact same time. I knew this person too. And they chose to work with a coach who was really one step ahead of them. And what's happened is because that coach was one step ahead of them, it's taken them a heck of a lot longer to get traction because the gap in knowledge isn't great enough to pull them along. So look for mentors and role models that have done the crazy stuff, that are like way ahead, that are going to see you and say, hey, you can do this. I believe in you. And here's how you can do it. And here's how you can shortcut it. And here's the biggest mistake I made. Like, look for the people who have done it and they've done it big. Those are the people that will help you move faster. And those are the people that will fill you up with encouragement.
Mm. I love that answer. And when you had told me that, it was a really cool opportunity to expand my own horizons because first I took stock of, okay, who are the people, like you said, your first point of who's draining your energy. And you're right, everyone can answer that. And sometimes we avoid thinking about that question because it means having to be honest with ourselves. And I love that you said that doesn't mean you have to have a conversation or be like, we're not hanging out, but just it's just shifting your energy and just bringing awareness to it. But then it also inspired me to look at, okay, I might not have the people in my life right now that have done the thing that I want to do. But that means I get to look for those people and I get to seek them out and be inspired by them, which is reminds me of the growth mindset as well. And I just I think that those pieces of advice are so valuable when starting because they can bring a fresh set of eyes to a situation that you might have been, or I might have been struggling with for a while, of feeling not as encouraged as I would like to, or, being too focused on the feedback I wasn't getting rather than I have the ability to, whether it's read a book or follow someone on Instagram or just seek out those people that will fill me up.
Binge watch somebody's YouTube channel with all kinds of great stuff. There's so many resources out there. And I think the other thing that you have to remember is if there's someone in your life who is an energy vampire and you decide that you want to take a little bit of a step back and maybe reduce the amount of time that you spend with that person, they're going to want to spend more time with you. That is the universe's way of testing you to see, are you serious about really protecting your energy and being around people that give to you? And so you have to be strong in those moments. And like I said, you don't have to say to them, hey, I'm going to spend less time with you, but you have to stick to the, sorry, I'm busy, or I can't do that tonight, I have other plans, and really stay true to what it is that you want. Because remember, if they are an energy vampire in your life, you're an energy giver in their life. And so they're not going to want to not be around you. Now, I shouldn't say that, because you being around somebody who's an energy giver doesn't mean that you're a vampire. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But typically when you're with a vampire, the reason you feel exhausted is because you're giving, 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 giving. So you just want to be mindful of that.
Yeah, I love that clarity and highlighting the fact that I never thought of it that way, the energy vampire and the energy giver of, yeah, of course that person's going to want to bring you back into their orbit. And it's like, wait, I'm not getting as much from you. And the other thing that in the last question that really stood out to me was you talking about the people who have done it big and looking at the people who have gone the distance and the skill set. And it reminded me of what I talked to you about how valuable lived experience is. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit about that, because I know that sometimes education is really cool and learning is really cool, but I know I've gotten caught up in, oh, do I have enough education? Do I know enough? And really discounting my lived experiences as valuable. And I'd love for you to speak to that.
Well, I'm a high school dropout, and I'm not certified in coaching. Lots of people have coaching certifications, and I refuse to get one because I don't want to change the way I help people, because I know the way I help people works. It's not to say that it's bad to have an education or bad to do those things, but I think that there are many ways to learn, and lived experiences are just as important, if not more important, in certain areas than traditional education, because a lot of the traditional education is not necessarily hands-on experience. And so what they teach you in a classroom, when you go to apply it, it's the application that really gives you the experience. I can't read a book and learn how to fly a plane. I need to get in a cockpit. And so there's certain things you just cannot really comprehend without the lived experience. There's certain things that you can figure out in lived experiences without traditional education. And then there's certain things you absolutely need traditional education. You're not operating on a tumor if you don't know how to actually do surgery, right? So I think that there's a blend of both. I think that we often underestimate, though, the value of some of our lived experiences. And for me, I grew up in retail, and I was a manager. I was a district manager. I was a regional manager. I was leading and coaching and developing people for really big companies for a long time. And so when I started my business, the thought of not being qualified to coach didn't even cross my mind. And I know that, again, it's who you spend your time with. I know someone else that has pretty much, they started this business, and all these people said, well, you need a degree in this and you need a certification in this. And I'm like, no, you don't. They think you need that. because they're
Mm.
probably jealous that you're actually doing something with your life and they're not. And so it's really easy for those people, the wrong people, for you to spend time around to point out all the things that you don't have because they're in the gap. But really, why are they doing that? They're probably doing that because you are reflecting to them what they could be doing in their life and they're not. And so it's easy to project our own insecurities onto someone else. So when somebody says you can't do that, who the hell are they to say what you can and can't do? Maybe they can't do that, but no one can decide what you or I can or cannot do except for us. I mean, let's talk about Kim Kardashian, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Whoever thought that she would become a lawyer? Come on. Whoever really thought that that woman had what it took to pass the bar? And she
Mm-hmm.
didn't pass that baby bar the first time. Like she struggled and had to go again and again and again, but she did it. And so, who am I to judge what she's capable of? I'm not her. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I think that too often we let other people make us doubt what we're capable of. And really, you can do anything if you are prepared to do what it takes. If you're
Mm.
prepared to do the work, you're prepared to put the reps in, you're prepared to get back up after falling down multiple times, then you can accomplish anything. It's the
Mm.
it's the grit and the resilience that you have inside of you that can never be fully comprehended by someone else because it's yours, it's not theirs.
Mm.
So I think lived experiences are super, super, super important. And I would rather learn from a somebody who has $100 million or $1 billion business who doesn't have a shred of education than somebody who's book smart and never started a business.
Mm. That's really impactful. And I think that what you're talking about with the projection and how easy it is for people to project their own insecurities on us, I think something I've learned in that experience of is the reason that I take it to heart is because somewhere deep down I actually believe that. So there's also the work there of when someone reflects that back to me of, oh, maybe you don't know enough or whatever. The reason it activates me so much is because that is a belief that I have. So it's kind of a two-way street in my
Mm-hmm.
experience. And this is my last question, and it's about what kind of we started talking about. Of you just talked about a beginner mindset, and when in the intro of you might not be starting a business, but we can really learn from the beginning. And what are some benefits that often go overlooked about being a beginner in your field or in your career? Um, yeah, what are some benefits to that?
In the beginning, you don't know what some of the challenges are going to be. In the beginning, you don't know what you don't know until you know. And I think that that beginning place where you're really you're going to be so grateful when you have your first $5,000 month. You're going to be so grateful when you have two or three or four or five active customers. And then when you get going in your business, all of a sudden you're like, my God, my customers are bothering me. Like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes people get to a point where they're like, wah, 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 about their business and they forget how much they wanted this
Mm,
thing that they built. And so I think going back to that beginner mind is really powerful. I did an exercise with a client of mine last year. She was in a spot in her business where she just seemed kind of pissy, like not happy, not fulfilled. And so I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We are going to do an exercise where we are going to pretend that you're starting a brand new business and I'm going to give you $250,000 to get this business off the ground. And you do not have any of your existing employees and you don't have any of your existing customers. You have no responsibilities to anyone. What would you do if you were starting this business that you're in right now over again? How would you
mm,
structure it? What would you do differently? And the stuff that came up that day was incredible. And now, guess what? She's doing it all. And she's super excited and stoked and happy about where her business has gone.
Mm.
When we are in our business for a long time, we can get really attached to people, to process, and forget that we started a business so that we would have the freedom to do what we wanted to do. And sometimes we have to let people know that things are changing and that we're going to stop a program or we're going to raise a price or we're going to do something differently. But we have to give ourselves permission to do that. And the longer you're in it, the more you forget that you get to make the rules. And that's
Mm.
why I think it's important to go back to beginner mind sometimes and to just really think about, if this was new, what would I do? And
Mm.
to remember how scrappy you were when you were starting. I remember when I started this business, my God, I was like reading, I was online, I was doing stuff all the time. I was so energized by the idea of what I was building. And now that I've built this huge business and I've got all these people that work for me and all these clients who rely on me, sometimes I'm not as passionate about learning new things. And I have to remind myself to go back to the beginning and think about, what is it that I'm building? And I need to make, decisions around, what am I going to stop doing? There was a book that I read at the beginning of this year called Necessary Endings. It's a fantastic book. There is a season for everything, and that applies to your business too. And when there are things in your business that you want to stop doing, you need to tap back into beginner mind to think about, what do you want to start doing now?
That's really, really cool. And it is inspiring for me to focus on those attributes as positive, rather like I'm hearing scrappy, I'm hearing, being energized by what you're doing, trying things differently, and having this reflected back to me now gives me the opportunity to now go into my day to day and choose to see it as a strength rather than something I need to be fearful of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, great questions, Mackenzie.
Thank you. I
Uh,
appreciate your answers.
I love it. This has been a really rich conversation. So, for those of you who are listening, I'd love to hear what you think. If you want to reach out to me on Instagram or via email and let us know what you thought of this conversation, we would love to hear from you. I got to tell you, our reviews on Apple Podcasts, we haven't had many this year. I think there's only been a couple. So, if you've been listening along all year and you have not left us a review for She Talks Business, please, please, please know that it would make my holiday season if you would take a moment and give us a 5-star review and let us know what you think. And we will be back. I know Mackenzie's got all kinds of stuff planned that she wants to talk about. I'm sure we're going to talk about money. I'm sure we're going to talk about customers and, marketing and all kinds of interesting stuff. So make sure you stick with us through this season. And thank you, Mackenzie, for the great questions and the great conversation.
Thank you. I look forward to our next conversation.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And I'm trying to think of when this episode is airing. I think this episode is airing the week before Christmas. So if you are in the silly season of getting ready for your family, I hope you're having a wonderful week and that you get to spend lots of time with people you love in the very near future. Bye for now.